Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. It means everything to me. Before we get started, I just wanted to say to everybody that has been reaching out to me, showing me support, I appreciate you so much. When I tell you I appreciate you, I truly mean it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Please leave me a comment. Please leave me a like. It would mean so much to me. You guys are just the best, and I thank you. Christy Scone Codd was born on September 3rd, 1976 in Madrid, Spain. She grew up cooking primarily Cajun cuisine, and because her father was in the Air Force, she moved around quite often, including places such as Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. In 2012, Christy became a contestant on the 8th season of the Food Network series Food Network Star. On May 13, 2012, she would end up being the first contestant of the season to be eliminated. In October of 2014, Christy Scone and J.T. Codd were married on a mountain in North Carolina in a small, simple house on 36 acres, stretching from a valley to a wooden mountaintop. One of the things that stuck out most to family and friends that were in attendance of the small wedding under the tiny tent was a wedding guest named Robert Jason Owens, a down-on-his-luck handyman that the couple had hired and befriended. Friends of the couple would later tell People magazine, quote, "I remember him just being kind of weird, just not being the kind of people that you would find around JT and Christy," end quote. Another friend of the couple says of Owens, quote, "There was a gut feeling when I looked at this guy and I avoided him. This was one person I definitely did not want to meet," end quote. 38-year-old Christy and 45-year-old JT were both known for their generosity. JT was so non-judgmental, in fact, that he even decided to live homeless for a period of time just to understand what it was like. Friends would say that he was an advocate for the underdog. He really took everyone under his wing, even people others were not willing to give a second look to. The couple found and embraced a small town in North Carolina where they decided to plant their roots, build a farm, and work towards opening a farm-to-table cafe. Shortly after the wedding, the couple announced that they were pregnant with a baby girl who was due in July and would be named Skylar. Part of preparations before baby, the couple hired the out-of-work handyman Robert Owens to clear trees and build a well house for them, paying him $7,000 for his work. Along with that, they gave him a key to their storage shed and tools. The reasons behind it being completely selfless and just wanting to help Owen get his handyman business up and running. March 15, 2015, family members would report the couple missing after being unable to reach them. An anonymous caller that reported suspicious dumping that night of items in a trash container would lead police back to Owens. Owens admitted to taking the stolen items, and a later search of his home would turn up human remains. Owens would claim to have accidentally run the couple over with his truck, but opted to cover his tracks because he did not want to go to jail. Just wondering how that one worked out for you, dumbass. He claimed the couple was trying to help him after his vehicle got stuck in the creek and he hit the accelerator by accident. He would go on to say that he attempted to save Christy's life but was unsuccessful and that JT was already dead. After the murders, Owens burned JT's body in a wood stove inside his double-wide trailer. He would then take Christy's body back to her home. Once there, he cut her up in the shower, placed her body parts in bags, and burned her as well. Owens pleaded guilty to the murders. The district attorney would say, quote, "The murders are among the most disturbing killings in Buncombe County history because there are no surviving witnesses and Jason Owens had complete control of the crime scene for several days and had nearly completed the gruesome project of cremating his victims' remains. We will never know many of the facts surrounding the Codd's deaths," end quote. Owens admitted to 3 counts of second-degree murder and 2 of dismemberment. He was sentenced to a minimum of 59.5 years in prison. Prior to his arrest, he would sell the couple's items that he stole at pawn shops and flea markets.
By friends' accounts, 38-year-old Christy Codd, a Food Network reality star, was as beautiful inside as out. Friends add she and her husband, JT, were a loving team together. Just before 7 p.m. at their rural home, Buncombe County deputies sealed up their driveway with crime tape. Relatives, including a man believed to be Christy's father, at the home. Friends say her parents drove all night from out of state.
And I really do hope that they're found safe. I really do, because she's pregnant.
Cecilia Owens is Christy's good friend and neighbor who says Christy was expecting a child. Within 45 minutes of our interview with Cecilia, deputy cars raced up Hooker's Gap Road to Cecilia's neighbor. Crime tape then put up on the perimeter of the property that two neighbors confirm belonged to Jason Owens.
Marvin Pence Gaye Jr. was born on April 2, 1939 in Washington, D.C. to church minister Marvin Gaye Sr. and domestic worker Alberta Gaye. Gaye was the second oldest child of the couple's 4 children together: Jeanne Gaye, Zeola Gaye, Frankie Gaye. He also had a half-brother named Michael Cooper from his mother's previous relationship and Antoine Carey Gaye from his father's extramarital affair. He would begin singing in church when he was 4 years old, developing a love of singing at an early age, and was encouraged to pursue a professional music career at the age of 11 after singing Mario Lanza's Be My Love in a school play. His home life consisted of brutal beatings from his father, and he has said that had it not been for his mother, he would have committed suicide. One of his sisters would later disclose that he was beaten by his father from the age of 7 to well into his teenage years. In 1956, Gaye dropped out of high school and joined the U.S. Air Force as a basic airman. Disappointed in having to perform menial tasks, Gaye faked mental illness and was discharged not long after. After his return home from the Air Force, he joined the vocal quartet, the Marquis, with his good friend Reese Palmer. They got a deal to work with Columbia Records, but failed to chart and was dropped by the label. During this time, Gaye was writing his own music. In December of 1960, Marvin performed at Motown president Berry Gordy's house during a holiday party. So impressed with his talent, Berry Gordy decided to sign him with Motown's subsidiary, Tamla. Gaye would have a lot of highs and lows in his music career, beginning from when he first returned from the Air Force and continuing until 1962, when his first solo hit, Stubborn Kind of Fellow, was released, reaching number 8 on the R&B chart and number 46 on the Billboard Hot 100. He would also reach the top 40 with his dance song Hitchhike, and number 30 on the top 100. Pride and Joy would become his first top 10 single in 1963. More famous hits would include It Takes Two, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Your Precious Love, Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, That's the Way Love Is, and so many more. He was literally a musical and lyrical genius. At 12:38 p.m. on April 1st, 1984, in the family home in Hancock Park, Gaye would get in between a domestic dispute and physical altercation between his parents. Very shortly after intervening, Marvin's father, Marvin Gaye Sr., shot Gaye twice, once in the chest, piercing his heart, and once in the shoulder. The first shot would prove fatal, and Gaye was declared dead at 1:01 p.m. after arriving at California Hospital Medical Center, just 1 day short of his 45th birthday. After his funeral, his body was cremated at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills, and his ashes would be scattered in the Pacific Ocean.
To know that in the spirit of what he was as a human being and the spirit of his music, Marvin is with us.
Wonder was just 11 years old when he first met and played with Marvin Gaye. This day, he chose to remember his old friend with a new song.
Lighting up the candles, lighting up our love.
When the others had spoken, comedian Dick Gregory delivered the eulogy. He talked of a musician who broke new ground, of a friend whose smile was like a good day in June.
I like to raise people's consciousness, he said. I like to give them hope. Well, Brother Marvin, you did that. And you did it with class and warmth and love.
As the mourners filed past Marvin Gaye's casket, the service ended with his music, played by those who performed it with him.
Gay Sr. was initially charged with first-degree murder, but his charges were reduced to voluntary manslaughter following a diagnosis of a brain tumor. He was given a suspended 6-year sentence and died at a nursing home in 1998.
Legal cause?
No.
Any comment?
I'd submitted on the plea agreement,
Which was?
1 year concurrent with the 360 days he is now doing.
All right, Mr. C. of the State Prison today, I would have chosen the midterm. You'll be on formal probation for a period of 3 years. You'll do 365 days with 15 days good time, 15 days work time, no county parole. You make restitution for the damage to the, is approved by the probation officer.
Morning, Your Honor. I'm Barry Goldie, and my shift for Marvin Pence.
All right, and
You see, they discovered a very serious walnut-sized pituitary cranial tumor, and that tumor was removed in a state-of-the-art way through the nose. They didn't have to go and remove it through the cranium. He was further found to be competent, and after that, we went back into the system, and the system worked in every respect. This was a case of self-defense. This was a case of self-preservation. People tend to take themselves so darn seriously, and I can only say we don't want this ever to happen again. So stay cool. Stay cool.
Jenny Maxwell was born on September 3, 1941 in Brooklyn, New York. She was the only child of hard-working Norwegian immigrants. In 1958, she was discovered at her local drama school by director Vincente Minnelli. He brought her to Hollywood to film a test shoot with Frank Sinatra, and after that, she never looked back. Even though she didn't get the role in Some Came Running alongside Frank Sinatra, she would very soon book TV shows, including a part on Father Knows Best. It was during this time that she would meet and fall in love with 24-year-old assistant director Paul Rapp. In April of 1959, when Jenny was just 17 years old, the couple would elope. In 1960, Jenny would give birth to the couple's first son, Brian. Jenny would continue landing roles in shows such as The Twilight Zone, Dr. Kildare, and Bonanza. Then, in 1961, she would land the role of a spoiled rich girl alongside the legendary Elvis Presley in Blue Hawaii. Barely out of her teens at the time, Jenny would hit the Hollywood party scene running, with famous friends such as Sharon Tate and Peggy Lipton. But while Jenny's party life was on point, her home and career life were falling apart. She and Rapp would divorce, and she would eventually lose custody of her son Brian. In 1960, Jenny realized changes needed to be made. She reconciled with her parents, gained back partial custody of her son, and began working again, landing roles on My Three Sons and The Wild Wild West. She also began dating a man more than 20 years her senior named Irvin Tip Roeder. Roeder had 5 kids, a rough reputation, and had become a lawyer years after a career as a police officer. On February 17, 1970, the couple married and then moved into a large home on Cherokee Lane in Beverly Hills. According to friends, this marriage was a disaster, and by 1978, Jenny was done. On a sunny afternoon in June of 1981, Tip Roeder would be on the street screaming for help on his hands and knees on the sidewalk in front of a condo on South Holt Ave. A nearby clerk at a store would soon discover why Roeder was screaming. He had been shot in the stomach. 60-year-old Tip Roeder would die from his injuries. Inside the lobby of the condo, the soon-to-be ex-wife of Roeder, 39-year-old Jennifer Maxwell Roeder, would be found with half of her head blown off. No one was ever charged with the murders, and Jenny's family would be forced to file away her memory in their hearts. Rumors sprawled that the murders were the result of a mob hit or a botched robbery. A few months before his death, Tip began to act odd. Less than a year before his death, Roeder claimed he had been shot by a prowler in his backyard. The wound was further described as a superficial graze, though. He didn't initially want to report the incident to police. Tip Roeder was reportedly furious that Jenny would get a hefty divorce settlement. It is said that he disinherited Jenny, stating, quote, "It is my intention that Jenny Helene Roeder will receive nothing upon my passing. I do not want a lying, cheating, deceitful woman to profit." But there are rumors that Tip may not have been planning for Jenny to be around to contest his new will. 3 separate associates of Rodard shared in the month prior to the murders that he approached them about retaining a person to kill Jenny and one of her lovers. One of the associates claims that Rodard wanted a person to kill Jenny and Rodard himself. All of those associates claim they rejected his request but felt certain that he eventually located someone who did. And if Tip in fact was planning on killing her, Jenny certainly wasn't aware of it. On June 9, 1981, Jenny had minor surgery at Cedars-Sinai. According to a friend, she had told her that Tip had offered to drive her home from the hospital, which greatly worried the friend, but Jenny accepted the ride and had lunch with Tip at a nearby restaurant. By 3:15 p.m., Tip was dying and Jenny was dead. Detectives believe that the burglary theory holds no water. Nothing had been stolen from the Rogers, and rounds of the rare ammunition used to kill them were found in Tip Rodard's Lincoln Continental. Detectives believe that it's more likely that Tip hired a hitman to murder his expensive, estranged wife. Detective Thieves would say, quote, "My opinion for the motive for the hit on Jenny was for Rodard to avoid paying spousal support and just retribution for the behavior in general. I feel that Rodard's wounding was orchestrated to provide plausible deniability of his involvement in the killing of Jenny. Unfortunately for Tip, if that was the case, the hitman did his job too well." End quote. Police were never able to locate a suspect, and no leads on the killer's appearance were ever fruitful. Detective Thieves would say, "The case can never be closed until the identification of the actual killer is known." 30-year-old Stephanie Mosley was best known for her role on the VH1 series Hit the Floor and was on her way to making it big as a dancer and actress. Stephanie started dancing at the age of 2 when she was enrolled in ballet classes. She would go on to participate in multiple dance competitions in her youth and would win multiple awards as a teenager, even being invited to perform at Disneyland in Tokyo. Stephanie moved to LA in 2004 to pursue a career in show business. America's Next Top Model winner and former Real Housewives of Atlanta cast member Eva Marcel would be the first person to befriend Stephanie in California. The two would remain friends for 10 years, and it is said that Eva would be the one to identify her body after her death. Eva said of her friend, quote, "We made a pact and we decided we were going to figure this business out and become stars together." End quote. Stephanie would get her first big break in 2006 when she was handpicked by Jamie Foxx to play his wife on the NBC special Jamie Foxx Unpredictable. Stephanie's resume would continue to grow with roles on Once Upon a Time, Snow White, Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1, Hellcat, and Dancing with the Stars. After her death, Chris Brown would tweet, "Rip, baby girl. Danced with me on tour and was always the coolest person." December 8, 2014, husband and rapper Earl Hayes believed Stephanie was cheating on him. He would call his friend and confidant Floyd Mayweather on FaceTime in a rage over these cheating claims, telling Mayweather that he was going to kill his wife. Mayweather pleaded with Earl not to do it, but his pleas would fall on deaf ears. While on FaceTime with Mayweather, Earl Hayes would shoot and kill young Stephanie Mosley. 10 shots would be fired in the murder-suicide, with Floyd Mayweather witnessing the entire tragedy on FaceTime. Mayweather would confirm that Earl Hayes shot and killed Stephanie while she was in the bathtub before turning the gun on himself.
I was sitting with Melissa Brim. My best friend called me on FaceTime. We was talking a little bit. He put Stephanie on the phone. I talked to her, and I could tell that they looked like they both were doing drugs and drinking real heavy. I could tell they'd been up all night. They was talking. I heard the bath water running. He put it on FaceTime. He got back on the phone. I'm kind of getting choked up from this. So then I said, "Why you calling me so early in the morning? How you know I'm up?" He said, "Because I love you." And he said, "There's something else you don't know." And I was like, "Huh?" And then he reached down and put out a gun. I said, "Man, what are you doing with that gun?" He started shooting. Then he shot her. And then he put the gun to his head. And that's what it was. Then I had to bury my best friend.
He would go on to pay for the funeral of Hayes, saying that his reasons for doing so is because he believes his family has the right to mourn their son, despite his incriminating actions. And it's unknown if he paid for Stephanie's funeral in Canada. So I'm not really sure how I feel about this one, but let me know in the comments what your feelings are on Mayweather paying for this monster's, in my opinion, monster's funeral.
I knew Stephanie pretty well. She was one of my dancers for a while. It was a devastating thing.
She's just loved. She will never, ever, ever, ever be forgotten. She is so loved, and it's just too short, and that's it.
Giving back is, why we do all this.
Stephanie Mosley was stunning and danced with Hollywood's elite. J-Lo, Janet Jackson, and Chris Brown. She also starred in VH1's Hit the Floor. Her husband was rapper Earl Hayes. The up-and-comer was featured in Floyd Mayweather's Showtime documentary.
TMT, Monday Team.
Those dreams ended abruptly Monday morning. Now, the couple lived here in the Palazzo. It's a high-end apartment complex. Around 8 a.m., a neighbor called 911 after hearing a woman scream and 10 gunshots were fired. SWAT raced to the scene. The bodies of Stephanie and Earl were discovered inside. Now, this is where the story takes a disturbing twist. We have learned from multiple sources that just before the apparent murder-suicide, Hayes called boxing champ Floyd Mayweather Jr. Hayes is a member of the Floyd Mayweather money team. He has called Floyd his brother. Apparently, Hayes was in a rage. Well, Floyd Mayweather Jr. may not have seen everything that happened, but we have learned that Hayes pulled out a gun, shot his wife, then shot himself. And while Floyd may not have seen it, he definitely heard it all. Actress Eva Marcel knew Stephanie since they were teenagers.
She's just, living her dream, or at least trying to.
It actually still is very surreal. I haven't really fully processed it, to be honest.
James LaRose is the EP of Hit the Floor.
None of the cast or crew of Hit the Floor wants Stephanie to be defined or remembered for yesterday. It's a hideous, awful thing, and we needed to focus on Stephanie and the amazing person that she is.
Rebecca Schaeffer was born on November 6, 1967, and was the only child of a psychologist and a writer. In the late 1980s, Rebecca was a young actress who was struggling while waiting for her big break. She couldn't even afford a phone when her agent tacked a note to her apartment door telling her to report to the set of My Sister Sam, starring alongside Pam Dauber of Mork and Mindy. This would end up being Rebecca's big break. She would move from New York to California, where she lived a very quiet life in an apartment on North Sweetser. Robert John Bardo was the youngest of 7 siblings, the son of a former Air Force officer who grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and was the object of much mental and physical abuse. In 1986, at age 16 years old, while working as a janitor at a fast food restaurant, Bardo took a liking to a show called My Sister Sam. More specifically, he would become obsessed with the character Patty that was played by Rebecca Schaeffer. This obsession grew so strong that Bardo actually built a shrine of Rebecca in his bedroom. He would start writing Rebecca letters. Rebecca would actually respond to one of Bardo's letters, saying that his letter was the most beautiful that she had ever received. She then drew a peace sign, a heart, and signed it, "With love, from Rebecca." The same day Bardo received Rebecca's letter, he would write in his diary, quote, "When I think of her, I would like to become famous to impress her," end quote. In June of 1987, Bardo would arrive at Burbank Studios, where My Sister Sam was filmed. He was carrying a teddy bear and a bouquet of roses for Rebecca, but security turned him away. He would show up a month later, this time with a knife, and again, security turned him away. After the second unsuccessful attempt to get close to Rebecca, Bardo would take to his diary again, this time writing, quote, "I don't lose, period," end quote. In 1989, Bardo would see Rebecca in her new film called Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. In the movie, Rebecca has a scene with a male actor. This upset Bardo immensely. He couldn't bear visioning his innocent young girl being an adult woman. In his eyes, Rebecca had now become one more of the bitches of Hollywood, and he would decide she had to be punished for her immorality. He drew a diagram of her body, marked spots where he planned to shoot her, and asked his older brother Edgar to buy him a gun. Now 21 years old, Bardo would bombard Becca with love letters, collect videos of Rebecca on TV shows such as Amazing Stories, My Sister Sam, and One Life to Live. He would cover his room with dozens of pictures of Rebecca and write a letter to Rebecca's sister in Tennessee that said, if he couldn't have Rebecca, then no one could. He then hopped a bus, hell-bent on tracking her down. On July 17, 1989, Bardo called Schaefer's agent's office asking where she lived. When he was denied this information, he began to roam the streets with Rebecca's picture in hand, asking passerbys if they knew where she lived. When this didn't work, Bardo paid a private detective $250 to find her. July 18, 1989, armed with the address of Rebecca Schaefer, Bardo dressed in a yellow polo shirt and rang Rebecca's doorbell. Rebecca came downstairs, saw Bardo, and basically ignored his attention. About an hour later, Bardo would return to Rebecca's home and ring the bell again. Rebecca would answer the door once more. Her neighbor, Richard Goldman, would recount that he heard 2 gunshots and 2 blood-curdling screams. He ran to Rebecca's door and found her body in a black robe, twitching. He checked for a pulse but didn't find one. Witnesses would say they saw a young man in a yellow shirt running up the block and disappearing into an alley. Rebecca was rushed to Cedars-Sinai and would hold on for 30 minutes before succumbing to her injuries. The next day, back in Tucson, motorists would call 911 to tell them that a man was running around in traffic on Interstate 10 trying to get hit. After being apprehended, he would immediately confess to the murder of Rebecca Schaefer. Arizona police faxed his photo to Los Angeles police, and witnesses would confirm that Bardo was indeed the person they saw running up the street that day. Rebecca's body was shipped back to her native Oregon for burial. A year after the slaying, Bardo gave an interview in which he stated, "I was a fan of hers, and I may have carried it too far, but a lot of things have appeared in the press to make me out to be a monster. If I had one wish where if it was to ever come true, it would be for Rebecca Schaefer to be alive today." Bardo was tried and convicted by prosecutor Marcia Clark, who would later become famous for her unsuccessful attempts to prosecute O.J. Simpson in the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend. Convicted of capital murder with a non-jury courtroom, Bardo was sentenced to life without parole by Superior Court judge on December 20th, 1991. Bardo would recount the incident by saying, quote, "She had this kid voice, sounded like a little brat or something. Said I was wasting her time. Wasting her time? No matter what, I thought that was a very callous thing to say to a fan, you know? I grabbed the door, gun's still in the bag. I grabbed it by the trigger. I came around and kapow. And she's like screaming, screaming, why, and it's like, oh God," end quote.